Yo, what's going on, everybody? Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Kieran Alger. He has just run the entire length of the Danube River in Europe. That's from the Black Sea all the way to its source. An incredible journey over, you know what? I remember the number in kilometers, but not miles, but he'll fill us in all about it and do all the metric to the imperial conversions that we need. Here he is, Kieran Alger, everybody. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I was doing those imperial to metric conversions the entire journey as well, because obviously we operate in miles here.
Right.
All the signposts are in kilometers. So the whole way I've been doing, maths. So yeah.
It was a long journey. How long of it was it?
So in miles, it was about 1,840, basically that's kind of the end number. So originally I thought it was going to be around 2,000, but it turned out the routes I took were a little shorter, which was kind of like a happy thing.
Okay.
And I think, I'm not sure what that is in kilometers, but somewhere short of 3,000 kilometers.
Incredible, incredible. And how many days did it take you to do this journey?
And I did it in 67 days. So it roughly kind of breaks down to, I think it's like 32 miles per day or something around that mark on average. But some days were shorter. I think the shortest run I did was 11 miles. The longest run I did was 43 and a half. So, and many times I was running kind of the marathon distance or over on those days.
Okay. And then, and you documented this entire journey on your YouTube channel?
I did, yeah. I've got a YouTube channel at Man v Miles, and I did kind of short little videos as I was going. Initially, really, I was recording just for my own kind of, my own sort of to be able to look back and document it. But it actually became quite a good way of having a process in the afternoon. Often I would finish the run around 1 o'clock, and it gave me something to do kind of whilst I was in my hotel room having to rest rather than just sitting on my bed, because I guess one of the hardest parts of this is you're sort of traveling through all these amazing places in Europe, and you kind of want to go out and walk around and have a look and get involved and see the cities, but you can't really afford to add the extra miles into the legs. So often I'd be in a hotel room or an Airbnb or a campsite, and this is how I'd fill my afternoons.
Amazing, incredible. And we'll get into a little bit more into that workflow in a bit, but I just want to make sure we're kind of like setting up this entire journey and everything correctly first, so that people here can get a sense of it. I had noticed that you were doing something because I had started seeing on Strava. I'd been following you already on Strava, and all of a sudden there's these just gigantic runs coming up. And I'm like, what the heck is he doing? And then people were like messaging me like, do you know about this guy, Kieran? He's running all the way across Europe. Well, not all the way across Europe, but that's kind of like how they would like frame it to me. I'm like, I know Kieran. We met. I'm like, we've met. I've spoken with him before.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we met not long before at the ASICS kind of Metaspeed Sky launch, and at that time I knew that this was coming up, but I guess I'd made a decision quite quickly after the pandemic, really. I'd been thinking about this run for probably about a decade.
Okay.
So the story kind of going back, I was traveling around Europe, and I ended up sat in a cafe in Vienna overlooking the Danube. I was with a friend who came from Vienna, and there was another friend who came from Belgrade, which is down the river. It's one of the major cities on the river as well, so sort of downstream. And the friend from Vienna sort of joked to the other friend, if I were to put a message into a bottle, throw it into the river, in 6 days' time, you could fish it out, and this is how we could communicate. And this idea just kind of stayed with me for years and years. I just kept thinking about this river that connects so many different kind of countries. We run through 10 countries in total, 4 capital cities. And it's got such a big history, and there's so many stories attached to it. It's like the lifeblood of a continent. And this idea stayed with me for a long time. And then at one point, maybe around kind of 2015, 16, I was thinking about sort of challenges that I could do that would be bigger than the things that I've done in the past, something really, really testing. And this idea kept coming back. So I started to have a look and see how easy it would be to plan the routes I used Komoot, the online kind of mapping tool. But it wasn't really until after the pandemic that I really decided, actually, do you know what? Life's too short. You don't know what's going to happen. And around 2021, I got really serious about it. And opened up the spreadsheet, opened up the Google sheet, and started to really get into the planning and went for it.
Awesome. I mean, that's incredible. Like, because when we had met in Spain, we ran a 5K together because there was like a mass participation 5K, and you ran like a 19-minute and change 5K, like a little bit before you started off on this epic journey. Like, what kind of training goes into something like this in terms of, like, is it just a lot of high mileage weeks? Is it a lot of not running? Like, like, how do you even start to approach something like this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of break this down into sort of two sections. I guess, for what we do, I also am a journalist. I test running gear. I have to be running all the time. I'm kind of always pretty much marathon fit. Depending, I'm not going to necessarily run my fastest marathon all the time,
Right.
and how much I suffer going out to do it will vary. But I can always get one done, and I break it down over sort of a decade or so. I've done lots of different challenges where I've done around kind of 50 marathons. I've done back in 2013, I ran a half marathon every day in the month of December. So I've done lots of consecutive. I've done the Marathon des Sables, a bunch of ultras and bits and pieces. So I think over that kind of period of like a decade, I've kind of built the mindset and the tools and the platform, and the experience and the knowledge of what to do when things might go wrong with your feet, and the logistics and all of that stuff. How to get up the next day and run again when you're not feeling like it at all. All of those things I've kind of gained over a long period of time throughout my entire kind of running sort of history. And then there's the sort of more specific training that I did in the build up, which was essentially around 6 months. And I just did lots of long, slow mileage, no more really than you would find in a regular marathon training plan.
Okay.
Did a lot of work in the gym. I did a lot of strength work, weightlifting to try and get a little bit leaner. I ran with a weighted vest sometimes and a 10-kilo pack, because I did this whole journey across Europe carrying all the kit I needed to be self-sufficient. So I had to get used to being able to carry sort of 10 to 12 kilos. So I took some of the weight I was carrying on my belly off,
Okay.
so I could carry a little bit more on my back.
Every kilogram counts.
Yeah, and those two things, I guess, come together where I knew how to wake up the next day. And then in November, I did a specific piece of training, which I did. I went out, I did 7 marathons in 7 days.
Okay.
In the November before. And that was the final piece of the puzzle, really, to give me an idea of how the body holds up under that kind of strain. Beyond that, I went to start this run in Romania not really knowing what would happen after 7 days. It was a shot in the dark, really.
So like after 7 days, that's kind of like for a lot of people doing their first marathon training block, like they do the 20-mile run during the training block, but then they get to the race and you're like, who knows what's going to happen here? After day 7, you were just like, I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, had no idea what the body would do. And also, I guess the 7 marathons I did here in London, I have my house, I have all the food that I like to eat. I can take a bath, I could put my legs up, and I could do all of the things. I had all those creature comforts. When I was starting this out and doing those 7 days in Romania, I was running with a pack, moving in unfamiliar territory, unfamiliar foods, having to deal with all the logistics of finding accommodation. There's heat that I ran much of this run. I'd end up running above 25 degrees Celsius. I don't know what the Fahrenheit is of that, but
I don't even.
And at times it was up to kind of 41 degrees Celsius. So
I know that's hot. I know that's really hot.
It was warm. So lots of different things, which again, there was lots of new territory for me.
Well, let's get into some of the gear, because I think that a lot of people are going to be really interested in terms of like what you pick and what you don't pick on a journey like this. First, let's talk about the shoes. One pair. I know I watched a journey interview, and you initially wanted to try to bring one pair of shoes for the entire trip. Were you able to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I have this crazy. I guess kind of running shoe manufacturers will tell us there's a time when we need to change up our shoes, and I wanted to see if this was. I wanted to put this to the test in the ultimate way, and see if I could manage in one. And also, there's a part of me that feels like, from an environmental point of view and a logistical point of view, it would have been great to be able to do it. So I set out, and it was a very difficult decision about which pair of shoes to take. I mean, that was something that I was very nervous about. So I tested out an awful lot of different shoes, and I came to the kind of idea that I would run in the Saucony Endorphin Speed 2. Reason being, really good daily trainer I found, nice and comfortable. I felt like most of what I was going to be doing was going to be on tarmac
Hmm.
or compacted, kind of quite hard river paths and trails. And I've found that had good durability. So
Hmm.
that's the shoe that I hit upon initially, and I did about 700 miles in
Wow.
that shoe before I changed out.
Okay. Where is that shoe now? Is it like a space mission where like once you're done, it's like you jettison everything, or did you like send that home to yourself? Where is that shoe?
I've got these. I've got the artifacts. I've got all my. It's all
Okay.
still here. So the
Nice.
shoe, and I've got. I'm planning to sort of do a little comparison at some point of the Speed 2, which I did 700 miles. I moved into the Speed 3,
Okay.
and
Okay.
I only used two more pairs of Speed 3s
Okay.
throughout the run, and broke those down into about kind of 500 and I think another sort of 600 miles or something. So
Hmm.
yeah, I've kept them. Yeah, they smell bad.
Yeah.
They are
I
in
guess it doesn't
Ziploc
matter how
bags.
breathable the shoe is at that many miles at that part of the summer. It's just going to be gross.
It was one of the most challenging things. But and bearing in mind, I didn't really take much kit with me. I had the kit that I ran in,
Hmm.
and then I had one change of clothes for my evening. Which was basically a pair of tracksuit bottoms.
Yeah.
But then every time I put my clean socks I only had one pair of shoes, so I put my clean socks for the evening into those shoes, instantly contaminated.
Yeah.
That was it. No clean socks. So yeah, it was. I wasn't that welcome when I went into supermarkets and shops.
Yeah. I can imagine. Like what are some of the looks that you would get coming in, like smelling, like I imagine you smelled like at the end of like 8 hours, 9 hours on your feet in the middle of summer? Like, do people just like think that you're like a space invader coming in, or are people like, who's this homeless man? Like what's kind of like the reception that you're getting when you come to these places?
Well, I guess many places I was running, it was quite kind of rural, and people, across Romania and Bulgaria and Serbia, often I'm running in places where people don't run. I mean,
Okay.
people don't run generally,
Hmm.
but they're not used to seeing a guy, running through their town or their village or
Hmm.
along their streets anyway. So then when I'm stopping and going into the shops, it's like the first question they would always ask me. They're more used to seeing cycle tourists, if
Okay.
anything,
Yeah.
and they would say, "Where's your bike?"
Okay.
And I'm like, I don't have a bike. All the border guards would ask me when I'm crossing the border. The first question is, "Where's your car?" I'm like, "I don't have a car."
Right.
"Where's your bike?" "I haven't got a bike." And their face would sort of drop, and this kind of incredulous look about what I'm doing would come
Mm.
up. But yeah, I mean, it was actually much more strange when I would enter the capital cities.
Okay.
I would always look forward to this moment when you go into the major cities because these are kind of iconic places to reach.
Hmm.
But you'd kind of wander in from the wilds, with a beard and stinking and with no urban sort of city clothes. And
Hmm.
occasionally, I had a friend who treated me to stay in a nice hotel at one point, and I've gone into this kind of really cool, sort of urban. You've got these kind of sort of hipster boutique hotel, dressed the way I'm dressed, and
Yeah. Yeah.
just people are like, "You don't belong here." The interesting thing is the way that my actual outlook changed. I really began to sort of not worry about all of that.
Hmm.
I couldn't because there was
Yeah.
nothing I could do about it. So
Right.
I relaxed about lots and lots of things about what people would think about me, And
Hmm.
if there's one thing I've taken away from this run is that I realised that actually I feel very sort of self confidence and happy in my own skin no matter what. Now, it's I wasn't expecting that, but it was really quite a powerful thing to do.
That's incredible. Like, so the other thing that I think is remarkable to follow kind of on that note is that after you ran all these miles, all these days, you then less than 2 weeks later ran another marathon, like put on a bib and ran a marathon. Why would you do that?
Well, I guess if you think about the way that when I sort of say I've run a marathon on average a day for 67 days, a lot of people will be thinking in terms of city marathons. They think about the fact that once they've done one, they can't walk down the stairs into the subway, or the next morning they have to lift their legs out of the bed. I'm running out in the Danube very slowly. It's often like a marathon taking me anywhere between 5 and 8 hours. So it's almost like constant recovery running.
Hmm.
And what I noticed during the journey was that when I started out, I'd be running at, say, like an 8.5, no, so like a 9.5 minute per mile pace with a heart rate of 145 or something.
Hmm.
And over time, not only did my pace get quicker, running at the same kind of feeling of intensity, but I noticed that my heart rate was dropping. So by the end of it, I was running 8.5 minute miles with a 10k pack in the heat, and my heart rate wasn't going above 125. So when I got to the end of this, I was thinking, do you know what? I feel like I've done the biggest block
Right.
of really low and slow cardio training.
Hmm.
I wonder what would happen. And I felt good, I felt my body felt okay. The muscles didn't feel too tight and damaged, or the tendons too overused.
Hmm.
I thought I just wanted to go and see. So I ran a marathon here called the New Forest Marathon. It's a trail marathon. It's not too hilly, and I covered my watch, and I ran the whole thing entirely on feel. So I didn't look at my watch once for the whole time I ran the marathon, and just ran how my body would let me. And I ended up running 3:10, which is, I was surprised myself, but it was,
Incredible.
not only did I run quite well, that running on field idea was, I probably ran the best paced marathon I've ever run.
Hmm. That's wild. But like, do you, like after you've completed a journey like this, like does the volume just get turned? And you were talking about like, you don't care what people think about you and coming into like all smelly or whatever you happen to look like. Like, does the same thing apply to like racing now? Like, does the volume just get turned down and you're like, I don't care what the time is? Or do you still have that fire to like, I might want to chase some PBs, or is like that just so low on the overall list of priorities? How does that
I mean,
change?
for this one, I was interested to see if I could run this course fast. I've run it a few times before, and I just more interested about kind of the idea of the training, because in the past when I've trained for a marathon, I've done lots and lots of quite kind of fast sort of speed work and intervals. So I was interested for that. And I guess off the back of this, whilst I'm probably as fit as I've ever been or may ever be, there is a little sort of person on my shoulder sort of saying, why don't you go and try and set some PBs and see if you can do it, rather than just thinking, I don't really care about that anymore.
Sure.
The flip of that, though, I think is I've realised that there's another soul maybe to running that is a very different soul to the one that you sort of experience when you're racing.
Sure.
Which is just the freedom and enjoyment of the movement, and it doesn't matter how long it takes me. I'm just going to go from A to B, and if I have the time and it takes me 6 hours, then great. I can stop and eat, pastries and baked goods and have coffee and get up and go again.
Yeah.
At one point during the Danube, I actually stopped and ate a chicken schnitzel, which is basically breaded chicken,
Right,
at mile
yeah.
17 of a marathon. Got up and ran the last 8 miles, and I ran better after the schnitzel. So
Well, a good fried chicken will do that.
yeah. I mean, and it wouldn't have, go back in the history. I would never have contemplated doing that before, but
Right. Right.
who knew?
Well, let's talk some more about like some of like the nutrition and stuff. Like I saw that you set out and you occasionally got resupplied with like traditional runner food, like gels, bars, hydration, stuff like that. But like, you've got to be consuming a ton of calories, and I don't think you're carrying all that. What are you doing food wise, like as you're going along from like Eastern Europe to where you finished almost 2,000 miles later?
Yeah, I mean, I carried maybe 2.5 kilos of running, like traditional running fuel. I think on average I was burning somewhere around kind of 5,000 plus calories per day.
Right.
So I had to supplement with what I could find, and I really just early on made a decision that I had to eat whatever I could find, basically. So I would walk into a shop, I'd sort of stop along the route, pop into a small shop or whatever I could find, and the things that basically popped into my head that my mind kind of craved, I'd buy them and eat them.
Yeah.
And I kept it quite simple, and that there were things that really worked for me that I discovered that I didn't know before. Sparkling water, so carbonated water, I found really refreshing in the heat. I would run with bottles of still water and electrolytes, but for some reason carbonated water hit differently, and so every time I stopped I would drink that. fruit juices. In Germany and Austria, they have, pre-spritzed apple juice,
Oh,
and
that
it's a
sounds
bit,
delightful.
and it's delicious. It's really, really lovely, and it's quite an artisan thing. So you can go and they've got, so many apple orchards over the place. It's a bit like,
Okay.
you go and pick up various different sort of types and farms, and people have made it. And I ate an awful lot of, pastries. So I don't know, donuts and fruit-filled pastries, strudels,
Yeah.
turnovers. All of those things were big. Often in sort of Serbia and places, you also get something called burek, which is like the one that I went for was kind of savoury, kind of cheese-filled pastries, and they were good for the kind of salt content. But anything went, if I'm really honest, anything went. I ate salted crisps. I ate pretzels. I found these really amazing peanut butter filled pretzel sticks, which were again brilliant for the saltiness. And I ate an awful lot of Haribo as well.
So
All
are
of-
you
all
are
of
you
the-
eating? You like stopping to eat, or are you like, I got a long way to go, I'm just going to eat these like as I'm moving along, or both?
a bit of both it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I'd pull out and eat on the move. Many times I would give myself a break and sit and take time out and eat, particularly if I'm eating something slightly bigger. Every day momentum was really important for this. So I would often be up at 4:30, and I'd start moving at 6 in the morning to beat the midday heat.
Sure.
And then on average I'd move at 5 miles per hour roughly. And what I try and do is get 20 miles of any run done by 10 o'clock in the first 4 hours. That's when my son would wake up and I'd phone him and he'd be off to school back in the UK. And at that point I'd sit somewhere in a cafe and probably eat something a little bit more substantial. So that was the kind of rhythm that I would get into.
Okay. Now you mentioned your son. Like, I know that you had a couple of times where you had your family kind of drop in and kind of cheer you on along the way. How important was that for you to have that? Because otherwise, it seemed like you were alone a lot of the time.
It was huge. I mean, it made the difference really. I had family and also strangers that came out and ran with me, who'd found me on YouTube or on social media. But yeah, to have the family, the first stages in Romania were very lonely, and there was a lot of, I felt very vulnerable and kind of exposed. And my family weren't going to come out initially until towards the end, but they actually came out a little bit earlier in Serbia. And having the idea that I knew in sort of 10 days time I would run and get a hug from my son and my wife was massive. That was in the spreadsheet or on the calendar. It was a thing that kept me moving forwards.
Nice.
And then I had all these people just popping up, people I'd never met before, and the kindness of strangers and random acts of kindness, whether they were small people, truck drivers handing me bottles of water, or there was one section I was in, a really long, hot stage in Romania where I hadn't been near shade for 5 hours and I was cooked. It's like 35 degrees. And I came across one small farm building that had almost like 1 square meter of shade. And there was a lady, and I said, like, can I sit on your step? She didn't speak any English, but I pointed at the step, and she let me sit down. And I was like literally huddled into this tiny little section. And she came over 2 minutes later and started washing peaches from her orchard, and started handing me peaches, gave me water, and just treated me. It was such a, we did no language, but we sort of shared this moment where the kindness was enough to get me up and get me moving again. And I ran for the next 4 miles feeling empowered by it, and all the way along I had these different moments where people did things for me that would make you run with extra spring in your step. Often some people came and they crewed me for 2 or 3 days.
Wow.
And often it was at really, really crucial points. They gave up their time, their weekends, and sometimes ran with me. Sometimes they just came with their car and followed me for 3 days and helped me. It was that was really incredible. Honestly, without my family coming, without those strangers and the bits of kindness, there's no way I finished this run.
Now, in terms of the body holding up, like, I imagine that pretty much everything that could go wrong did go wrong. How did your knees hold up the entire time?
Knees were kind of okay.
Okay.
Feet had feet weren't happy.
Yeah.
For particularly in the first week, they my heels blistered up, my lots of blisters, lots of sore bits. But after a while, everything sort of dried out and calmed down. I was meticulous about how I cared for my feet, so I would I'd treat blisters and clean them, and luckily they dried out. And eventually, I guess after about maybe 7 to 10 days, that problem went away mainly. I obviously bits were sore, and then I got basic throughout the rest of the run, every sort of tendon and muscle and part of the legs took its turn to grumble and complain, and sometimes they were more serious than others. I had to be very, very careful. Whenever I felt the slightest twinge, I would ease back my pace, or I'd even stop to a walk. Sometimes you'd sort of take a step and you'd be like, well, that one doesn't feel good for a tendon that's running down into the foot, and I would just stop and walk it off, get moving again slowly, and hopefully that tended more often than not to they would disappear. Sometimes I would think, it's such a strange thing, I think this is where the mind and the body connection is huge. I'd be running along and I'd think, oh, I haven't felt my Achilles tendon today. 3 steps later, the Achilles would start grumbling, and I was like, why have I thought that?
Well, your mind will help you find what you're looking for, I think.
And I think, I do believe, having done this, I think you can make them go away as well. You can travel through that and have the ups and downs. I had a couple of more serious injuries where my quad blew a little bit, and I had, this is one of the moments where the timeliness of an intervention of a stranger was huge. It was in Bratislava. I had a run of days which were going to be a 40, a 36 and a 35 mile back to back with a blown quad, and I was like, I don't know, it hurt to run. And this guy Marianne arrived out of the blue with a car, and it meant that each morning I was able to wake up and run until my quad started to hurt properly. And then because he had the car, I didn't have to make it to the next place of accommodation. I could stop in the middle of nowhere and he could drive. And what it meant is I could manage the injury, and somehow over the course of 3 or 4 days, while still moving 30 miles a day, I managed to make the injury go away. I rehabbed it whilst moving, which is a remarkable thing. But I wouldn't have been able to do it without Marion, and that would, again, I look back at moments that were pivotal in the run, and that was definitely one of them.
And it's like that kind of timing, it's like, can't just be coincidence. It's like there's something helping you along this journey.
It starts to feel like there's a bit of destiny going on. I'm not, it's particularly when these people appear. He literally appeared out of nowhere. I'm on a dike road in Bratislava. These dike roads are like flood defences. There's no one for 25 miles. This guy rides towards me on a bike, all dressed in white. And as he comes close to me, he pulled up and slowed to a stop. And I'm, my first thought was, oh God, what's going on here? What's going to happen now? And then he just said, Kieran? And I went, yeah. It's like, I'm Marion. I've been following your journey. I've come to help you. And out of his backpack, he produces all of the food that I've basically been eating and enjoying for the whole of my run. So he'd spotted on Instagram the things that I'd enjoyed, and then had picked them all and brought them. And I'm not kidding. It's this kind of thing will, when you're out and you've run a long way, it kind of brings you to tears. It's like emotional moment when this person has just done something so remarkable, and it's one of the things I take away most from the run. I think is these acts of kindness that made me think about how I behave myself.
No, that's absolutely incredible, and it's like when those kinds of things happen, you get like a sense of gratitude, but also obligation, because you're saying you want to remember those things and then pay those things forward too, or pay those things back in another way.
Yeah, and you also when people all the way along, you've had these people invest in you in these ways. When you have the doubts or you feel like wake up and think, can I go again today? You think back to all the people who've invested in you, and you think, yeah. Of course I can go again. I have to. I want to build on the platform they've built for me. So
amazing. Let's go to, before we talk about like what's next and kind of wrap up, let's get a little bit more into the gear before I forget, because that's the part for me, as someone that like reviews things and really like I'm always wondering, did I test this hard enough? Like, this is an incredible test. Like, tell me about the pack. Tell me about the watch. Like, what are the things that worked well? And then you don't have to name names for the things that didn't work well, but maybe the items that maybe could have used some rethinking.
So first up, back to the shoes. The Speed 3 were better than the Speed 2. They're a bit wider, a bit more cushioned, and they ran like a dream for this. You know, they're like perfect daily trainer. I could run faster, I could run slower. They handled, you know, the tarmac and the sort of light trails. Absolutely brilliant. I've loved them. I took a pack which was it's a brand. It's called Instinct in the UK. Well, it's actually a French brand, but 20 to 24 litre pack, and that performed really well in the main. I had some few problems with durability where I had to fix it, but I'm putting this through, you know, the extremes that other people don't. Brilliant for compartmentalization of gear.
Okay.
It took the weight. It made 10 kilos feel like 6.
Okay.
It was really, really, really excellent for making it easy to cart all of that gear along. I ran with a Garmin Enduro watch, the first generation, and again, no problems with that. I had the comfort there of being able to know that if I couldn't find charging overnight, that this watch would go 3 days of my running without needing to be recharged.
Okay, so you're talking like almost 30 hours of GPS tracking and mapping before you recharge. Yeah, incredible.
Yeah. One bit of kit that was invaluable, and I hadn't. It's obvious to say it was a smartphone. You know, I relied more on the smartphone than I thought I would for mapping, for navigation, communication, all of those things.
And you're also editing the videos on the phone. Is that how you were making? Because you were making videos along the way.
Yeah,
it didn't sound like you're like uploading this footage for someone else to edit. So you're doing all this at night, right?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, so I used the Adobe Rush app to do the bigger videos, and I used another app called Beat Leap, which essentially matches all of your short bits of footage to the beat of music and licensed tracks, which made it easy to do those kind of nice sort of cutaway bits. Yeah, and I did all of that on my phone in the room at night. I didn't, it's the first time I've really realised just how much you can do. I normally edit on a laptop, but just how much you can do just with your phone. And I guess other bits of kit that were really important to me. I took a Garmin InReach Mini 2, which is a satellite communicator. It weighs about 100 grams. Now this thing basically can connect and transmit your GPS location live without the need to have mobile phone or cell networks. And it also, every morning I would basically set this tracking, send a message to sort of 10 contacts. And it would let my mum and my dad and everyone know that I'm moving, and they could follow me live, which was brilliant. It also has an SOS button, which you can transmit your location to set contacts. And again, I'm in Europe. I'm not in the really kind of wild sort of places, but it was such a comfort to know that people were watching, and it helped people come along on the journey with me. And that was like a safety blanket, basically. That was really, really nice to have with. I'm going to have to mention my shorts. I use this brand of shorts called Seamount, and they've got a twin sort of 2-in-1 trail shorts. Essentially, it basically has a built-in integrated belt, and pockets on the thighs, which meant often I would have to have a lot of kit to hand. So again, going back, there were lots of wild dogs. I took pepper spray, I took an audio deterrent, and I actually carried a rock all the way across Europe. It was to Ford. Do
you still have the rock?
I have kept the rock.
Nice.
It became, even though I didn't need it in Germany, I carried it still. It's my dog rock. And my fuel. And those shorts, they're just super comfortable. They, a pair of shorts last 410 hours of running without wearing out, and the belt was still in, the Velcro was still intact. That just means that I had everything that I needed to hand. They are wonderfully comfortable. I was really impressed with those.
Very cool. Awesome. That's incredible. You mentioned these dogs a bunch of times. Like these packs of wild dogs that you're worried about. Did you had some dog encounters, or you were near the dogs? Like, tell me about that, because I know at one point you were like in the videos you were like, we're getting kind of crazy out here with the dogs.
Yeah, there's a huge problem in Romania and Bulgaria, particularly with stray dogs, and there's actually quite a combination. There's a combination of loads of stray dogs that wander around through the towns and villages on the streets. There's also quite a lot of guard dogs that aren't behind fences, and then there's farm dogs, and all of these dogs many of them can be aggressive.
Okay.
And I would say there's quite a kind of dysfunctional relationship with dogs in these two countries. But what it means is when you're sort of entering a town, you can't really be running. If you are running, they can chase you.
Okay.
But also some of them will just attack, even if you're walking. So I had one encounter where I entered a town, and there's other people going about their business. All of a sudden, 3 dogs come from a property, ears forward, hair up, teeth out, gnashing. I'm basically, very close to getting bitten and properly attacked. A car came in and sort of got in their way and interrupted the whole thing. And you're running, therefore, through all of, the Romanian Bulgarian stretches, worried about dog encounters. Every house you go past that's got a gate open, or every town you enter, there are dogs. You're not sure if they're going to be the aggressive ones or not. And it's basically running in fear. And it was very hard. It was very hard. I mean, the only way... I'm not going to claim that this is exactly the same, but it's for the first time I've felt like maybe I'm experiencing what it might be like to be a female runner wanting to run solo in some cities across the world. Right. That there's this sort of... You're constantly on high alert, and it's emotionally draining.
Right.
Like, it's properly... And so that I got to a point after this 3-dog attack where the next morning I was scared to leave my hotel room, and that was one of the points where I wasn't sure I was going to be able to carry on. But
any other wildlife along the way that is anything near like the dog situation, or it was like the dogs it seemed to be like the main theme from videos that I saw?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really see anything else. Other people that I met who were cycling and sort of had encounters with some kind of wild boar, wild pigs. But the rest of it was kind of fine. I mean, I did run through an enormous swarm of bees at one point. There's a lot, which
I don't know why it's so funny, but that's
you can just hear it. I just heard it before I saw it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot in Romania and Bulgaria. There are loads and loads of people have. I guess they're beekeepers. There's all these kind of beehives along the side of the dike paths. And it was just a cloud. I mean, all the bees were just going home to deposit, whatever they'd gathered.
Yeah.
But it was like running through, it was sort of trying to duck and dodge. Yeah, that's a new experience for me as well. But
absolutely wild, absolutely wild. So then, you completed this incredible journey. You've run some fast marathons even after that. Like, is there like another, like, now what are you looking at? Other like big journeys? Like what's kind of like your mindset, like going forward in terms of your relationship with your running?
It's difficult, actually. I found it very hard to come back into normal life. Like, I think I've been back about 2 weeks, roughly speaking. And it's been hard to settle back into sort of daily life. And running, apart from the marathon, I've been out and done a few short runs. I think I don't know what's next in terms of whether I go and do another challenge. This one's pretty big. What do I top it with if I try and go bigger, or do I really want to go bigger? If I'm honest, the one takeaway that from this is that I got into the habit of moving every morning, and it felt great, and I felt great for the rest of the day. And although as a regular runner, I do run often, there's something about this idea of getting up and moving every day, every morning. And if there's one thing I want to take away, it's maybe taking pressure-free running or walking or movement first thing every day after I drop my son at school, or making that a commitment to myself to do that, because I know now how good it makes me feel. And I think it's quite important, and particularly doing it early as well. I just think it's the right way to start the day if you can. I know not everyone can, but so that's my commitment is to myself to get up and try and keep that habit of getting out early.
Fantastic. Well, when you come up with the next big idea, let me know. I can't wait to see what you're going to be doing next. Thanks so much for your time. I won't keep you too long. But what an incredible journey, and thank you for sharing that with us today.
Thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Take care.